Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Vancouver Resource Investment Conference channel. We're counting down to the next VRIC January 21st and 22nd, 2024. Tickets are in the description below. And today's guest is the host of the popular Innecco 64 YouTube channel, the home of alternative economics and contrarian views, which has amassed over 90,000 subscribers. It's Mr. Mario Innecco. Welcome to the VRIC channel.
Thank you, Jesse. Nice to be here.
So those who follow your YouTube channel know you are an avid student of history, particularly when it comes to the precious metals and the monetary system. So could you lay out for us why our current monetary system is so fragile and how the corruption we're seeing in that system today started in the first place?
Yeah, the reason it's fragile is because we don't have honest weights and measures anymore. It's akin to changing the dimension of the inch, the meter, or also changing how much a pound weighs or a kilo every day or every second. Because prior to 1971, when Nixon closed the gold window temporarily, money was a fixed weight of gold, and also to some extent until the mid-60s, a fixed weight of silver. And with the closing of the gold window, all of that went out the window. They did try to keep fixed exchange rates for a couple of years, but then by 1973, you couldn't do it because currencies were fixed to nothing, really. Politicians and central banks could just inflate ad infinitum with no anchor. And that's why I think everything is so topsy-turvy. And you could go back to 1914, I would say, as well, not just 1971, when Europe, most of the major powers in Europe dropped off the gold standard because of World War I, because it's difficult to finance big wars with sound money. So that's how I see it. And unfortunately, we've been living under this system for just over 50 years. And that's why we're seeing everything be the way it is, in my opinion.
So give us your take on the manipulation of the precious metals markets and why you think at least part of it may be coming to an end thanks to central banks around the world repatriating their gold.
Yeah, I think the manipulation, I noticed it back in '02, right after I bought my first gold coins. I bought some Krugerrands back in '02, mainly to diversify after the dot-com bubble crashed and my pension dropped a lot. Decided to buy some gold, and I started looking into things. And I used to sit in front of a trading desk most of the day, watching government bonds, but then I started watching gold, and I found like that the gold price did the same thing every day. Like it would drop quite a bit on the open of COMEX, which is around 1:20 London time, and then after the PM or the physical market closed in London for the PM fix, it would drop again. And I always thought that was weird. And then I looked into it, and I think the reason they manipulate or control the price of gold is that even though gold has gone from $35 per troy ounce since 1971 to almost 2,000 right now, so you could argue why they haven't done a good job in manipulating it because it's gone up. But I don't think that's the point of the point of the manipulation is to keep the general public out of gold and silver. So the way they do that is through the futures market and through the paper market in London, LBMA. They've got access to gold that basically doesn't exist. They short naked short gold, and they scare people off from getting into gold. They also make it frustrating because they'll have periods of years where gold doesn't go anywhere, and all of a sudden it goes up 30-40%, and you miss out. So you have to be, I learned early on that you have to be very patient. It is frustrating. Yesterday I was watching silver go up 3%, the dollar dropped below 100, and gold doing nothing. And I knew there's something fishy going on. But yeah, it's even provable because there's some WikiLeaks documents from 1974 where the US State Department and the Treasury were asking the bullion dealers in London what would be the best thing to do once gold became legal again from January 1st, 1975. And they said, well, we think you've done the right thing of creating a gold futures market on COMEX, GC, that's the code for gold, because silver already traded on the COMEX. And the dealer said, by keeping a very speculative paper market, futures market, you're going to keep the public away from the physical market. And that's what it's all about. If gold just went up in a straight line with no volatility, people would look at it and say, wow, I'm going to put my money in gold. And I think that's what it's all about. People still think it's a conspiracy theory, but we know that the Federal Reserve, since the collapse of the banks in March, they've been buying paper that's worth 60 or 70 cents to the dollar for $1. So they can do whatever they want. And I'm sure they do it with gold as well. And it's not just the Fed. I think the Bank of England, the City of London and New York are the two biggest culprits. And the part about repatriation, this even came out on Reuters and the FT, that more and more central banks are thinking of repatriating their gold, mainly from the Bank of England and the New York Fed. That will dampen a little bit of the this supply of paper gold, because what London does, especially because in London they hypothecate many times over, is that they use the gold that's kept there at the Bank of England from other people to lease it out many times over. So if that tonnage shrinks, that means they'll have less supply of physical, but they can still rehypothecate. But I noticed back in 2011, when gold went from below 1,500 to all-time high, that was right around the time that Hugo Chavez demanded delivery of Venezuela's gold, and it was 160 tons. And I think that was part of the reason why gold squeezed up. He got his gold quite quickly, and just being a bit conspiratorial, he basically passed on a few years later of cancer. Think what you may about that. So that's how I see the manipulation. Will it end? I think most things like that end. We had, you could argue, the London gold pool in the 60s was a overt actually effort by the major central banks in the West to keep gold at $35 an ounce. But then the French and the British, they saw that the Americans were printing too many dollars to finance the Vietnam War and the Great Society experiment, and eventually that blew up as well. So yeah, it's frustrating, but as I said, you have to be patient. This will blow up as well, in my opinion.
I want to pivot to some things going on in the UK where you're located. And the first is debanking of Nigel Farage, the former leader of the Brexit party in the UK. He's seemingly being debanked for nothing more than having a view that the current powers that be don't ascribe to. He was accused in the House of Commons of accepting money from Russia, I believe, although there's no evidence pointing to that. He's refuted it. What could this mean for your average citizen and their banking? And will this sort of move towards, because there's been no trial, there's been no evidence presented to the public and opportunity for him to defend himself. So if they can do that to him, it feels like they can do that to other people. Do you think this sort of thing could spread? And do you think that could ultimately lead more people to precious metals as a way of taking their wealth outside of the banking system?
Oh, definitely. And I think it's already happening to other people. The reason people think it's Nigel Farage is the first one is because he's a public figure. Like you said, he was the head of UKIP, UK Independence Party, who pushed for Brexit. But I'll give you an example. I think it was last year, I bought some gold online and I paid for it. And I got a call from NatWest, which I think is also Nigel Farage's bank. And they asked me, what's this transaction? This is security. And I said, well, it's none of your business what I'm doing with my money. And they said, oh, it's for your safety. And I said, well, I don't want to tell you. and out of a principle. And they said, well, I'm afraid we're going to have to freeze your account. So they threatened me to freeze my account. So I had to tell them. So they're already doing it. And I think, yeah, banks should be a place where you put your money and you do business with the bank. And just like any other business, if you go to the I don't know, if you go to a doctor, he's not going to talk to other people about your business. He's not going to be like on the lookout to see what you're doing, anything nefarious. If you have political views, he's just your doctor. And unfortunately, the banking sector has become like the police as well. And that's why I have a friend who said, he's in Germany. He said Deutsche Bank, they have more lawyers and compliance officers than actually bankers. So I think that's the way it's going. Maybe it's because the banks are also in charge of things, of policy and everything. You just have to look back to 2008. The banks were basically broke, but they went broke so big that we had to bail them out. And with that, they became like untouchable. And I think that's what the problem is. And I think, yes, buying a little bit of gold and silver regularly and keeping it outside the system is a good way to protect yourself if something were to happen to you. I'm not saying it's going to be perfect, because a lot of people don't even know if you show them a gold or silver coin what it is, but a lot of people do. And I've done business in the past through silver, not through gold, but I've you can say it's bartered, but it's actually paying with money, real money. So yeah, and I think the end game, of course, for the bankers and the government is the CBDC. I'm not sure it will succeed. It's a little bit like the track and trace that they tried to push onto us a few years ago. In 2020, I never downloaded that app, so hopefully, I'll never download a CBDC wallet.
What's up, guys? Quick break. My name is Jay Martin. I'm the CEO of Cambridge House and the host of the Vancouver Resource Investment Conference. I wanted to quickly point your attention to a link right beneath this video where you can subscribe to our new weekly newsletter. If you want to better understand the minds of the best investors in the resource space, subscribe to this newsletter. I author it personally every Sunday, and I love writing it. Hit that link below to subscribe. All right, back to the interview.
Definitely want to touch on CBDCs a little bit later, but first, I want to continue on some things happening in the UK, because you recently posted a video called "Private Equity Vultures Are Swooping Over Your Pension" about recent UK government pension reforms. Could you talk to us about why these reforms have you concerned?
Yeah, and this is just a proposal, and I don't think it's gone through. And it's like an understanding between the government, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, and the fund managers. And the excuse is that a lot of money in the UK is going into the bond market and that we need to diversify. But what concerns me is that, and even though it's not a big amount of people's pensions, it's like 5% they're looking for. But, they can always up that 5%. I heard that in Australia, they up the super fund by 1% in order to buy government bonds. But the problem I have with it is that they want to push a lot of people's money into private equity. Have I got anything against private equity? Not really. I mean, they're just like the corporate raiders of the 80s, and they buy companies on the cheap with a lot of leverage, and they strip them. It's not ethical, but if they want to do it, they can do it. But usually that kind of investment is for accredited investors, people with plenty of funds that can risk $1 million, and if they lose that, they're still okay. But to expose, I think, the average pension fund holder to that, I think is dangerous. And I don't know your view on this, but anything that government always touches or always has an intention of doing, you always get like the opposite effect. So reform is like, it's not a really the operative word. And I also saw that a lot of the Conservative Party, and this could happen also with Labor because they're all the same, I would say. They've been funded by a lot of these private equity groups. So I think there's definitely some people pushing that. And I don't think it's the best thing for a government to get involved in people's investments.
Yeah, and it seems like the government is getting more and more involved in but many aspects of people's lives these days, particularly in a lot of the legacy brand Western countries that are supposed democracies. I do have to get your take on the upcoming BRICS meeting in August and the potential for them to announce a new gold-backed currency. We have seen some semi-official announcement. The Russian embassy in Kenya tweeted about it. I believe the Russian news channel RT also talked about it. How impactful do you think this could be? Is this something that you actually see them launching and implementing anytime soon?
Yeah, it's difficult to say exactly what they're doing in terms of if it's a currency or if it's like a trading mechanism whereby you settle trades, deficits and surpluses with gold instead of the paper currencies. But I think there's definitely something happening there on the 22nd of August. I even saw today a tweet from Ronnie Stoffler from Incrementum AG that the South Africans have come out and said officially that they are looking to come out with a new currency. How it's going to be, I don't know. If you look at the euro, for example, it took quite a while for the euro to come about. They had to set the European Monetary Union bands, and it took more than 10 years. So maybe it's just a move towards that. But like Ronnie Stoffler said, it could be a huge moment in monetary history, a bit like the Bretton Woods meeting back in 1944. So we'll have to wait and see until August 22nd. We might even get something more official in the meantime from the countries and officials involved.
And do you fear kind of a reaction from the US government if they do feel like the US dollar as a reserve currency is a threat in any way? Do you think they will react?
Probably, and also the UK, for example. I saw that the UK Parliament, they've just written up something on China, Intelligence and Security Committee of Parliament on China. That's just come out, basically saying that China is a threat. So, yeah, they could implement sanctions like they did with Russia, but I'm not so sure there's much they can do about it because the BRICS nations, there's only 5, of course, right now, but I'm sure there's a long line of candidates that want to join. And if you add up all the countries that are interested, it comes up to almost half the world's GDP. And I also saw that the UK right now is invited the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia to come to the UK to talk about cooperation. And then the FT asked the person in government, and I read that this morning, the FT, when is he coming? And he said, well, that's up to them. We need them more than they need us. So, and I'm not saying here that the BRICS countries have a better system, or I just think they want to have another bank account, just like Nigel Farage has been debanked. They feel that it's a threat to them. They've seen what's happened to Russia, that they can be debanked. And I think the BRICS currency, whatever system they come up with, will be an alternative. What the US will do, I don't know. But uh, you could expect a major crises and an excuse to, I don't know, to escalate tensions. And we saw that Janet Yellen went to Beijing, I think last week. And so maybe they're what they talked about is not what they told us publicly. Maybe there's negotiations behind the scenes about how to proceed. But I think definitely, yeah, the dollar is still going to be a major reserve currency. But just like the pound, still, I think 5% of world reserves are still held in British pounds. So the dollar is not going to go away, but it's going to be less important. Why should Bangladesh buy stuff from China with dollars? They could use their own currencies.
Yeah, that does make sense. I have a bit more of a philosophical question for you. I've spoken about this with your friend Rafi Farber as well, so I'm interested to get your take. And that is that we're seeing radical political ideology being spread. We're seeing Western governments take a turn more towards authoritarianism, totalitarianism, whatever you want to call it, and a citizenry that seems widely asleep through this whole process. How do you think we got here? Do you think the corruption of the monetary system and the fiat money system has contributed to it at all? And, as money itself is an illusion, it can affect perhaps the fabric of society itself. And do you think a return to sound money, if that were to occur, could help to alleviate some of those issues?
Definitely. I mean, I've looked into history, like you said. I like looking at history, and back in the 1790s, France was in turmoil. French Revolution, and they'd been basically bankrupted since the early 1700s. First through Louis XIV, he left France bankrupt, and then came John Law and tried to make things better through the Mississippi bubble. That collapsed, and then 70 years later, they tried the assignats, mainly because of all the debt. And yes, I think the fragility of the monetary system, all the debt and turbulence of and the unsoundness of the money affects morals and society, because half of all our commercial transactions necessitate money. So yes, and back in the 1920s as well, after World War I, Germany was a defeated country, and the emperor had abdicated and became a fractured state. There's a lot of political upheaval. Hitler came to power, not to power, but his ideas started being listened to. You had a lot of political assassinations, the morals as well of people, gambling, speculation. And I think we are pretty much in the same situation right now. And they've been able to stretch it out for quite a while, because it seems like the whole of the West is involved in it. So it's not just one country. So it's easier to go downhill together with other people. And I think the BRICS, part of it is that they want to protect themselves. They know what's coming to the West, economically and monetarily. And yes, I think going back to sound money, that will depend on each individual, each one of us. It won't. We can't wait for someone on a white horse or government authority to do it for us, because they don't like sound money, because it hampers their actions. I think it was Alan Greenspan who said that statists have a real distaste for gold and sound money, because they can't do as much as they want. And I think that's why things are so crazy in the West right now in terms of socially, economically, because governments have this access to this printing press of funny money, and they can have all these government programs and do whatever they want.
Well, speaking of distaste for sound money, I'd like to end on CBDCs, which you brought up earlier. They seem to be getting closer to being launched. We haven't seen anything concrete yet outside of the Fed Now system, which the Federal Reserve strongly denies is tied to a CBDC. The executive director of the IMF has stated that they're working on a global CBDC system. So you're saying you hope it fails and people don't pick it up. I know in Nigeria, I believe they tried to launch a CBDC and there was a lot of resistance there. So they started doing things like limiting the amount of dollars you could withdraw from your account of regular currency. How far away is a global CBDC launch? Do you think most people will accept it in Western countries? And should people be worried about it at this point?
Well, here in the UK, the Bank of England and the Treasury, they've come out with some white papers earlier this year for a Brit coin, not Bitcoin, Brit coin. And they're saying that they just want to implement it gradually the next 5 years, and it's going to run parallel and everything. But I've spoken to Clive Thompson, who I've had on my channel quite a bit, and he's looked into it too. And he said that if you look at the Bank of England website and even the government's website, they're hiring a lot of people to work on CBDCs. Yeah, and I saw something yesterday that someone in Brazil reversed engineered the program for the Brazilian CBDC, and he found that they will be able to even like take money from your account. It's going to be programmable. So I think it's all going to depend quite a bit on what happens to our monetary system. If we get a hyperinflation, which I think is a risk, they could use CBDCs as an excuse. They could say, well, this system failed, we're going to bring you something better. My hope is that trying to expose these people, that more and more people learn that we can't really trust them to bring us a new system because they collapsed the old system. As for one global CBDC, it's going to be tough because they need to get the major countries into a CBDC, and then it will probably be easier. And I think the BIS might be involved in that because they've been going on a lot about CBDCs. So you could have one, but I think the BIS CBDC would be just for transactions between central banks, and then the central banks would transact with us, the public, depending on which country. But ultimately, it would be controlled by the men in Basel.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Mario. A ton of knowledge shared. For those who want to hear more from you, could you tell us about the Innecco 64 YouTube channel?
Yes, I started the channel back in late 2015. Like you said, I'm the home of alternative economics and contrarian views. I try to talk to my viewers as I used to talk to my institutional clients in the city, try to explain to them the nature of the system. And I do a video every day on YouTube at Innecco 64. And I also interview people sometimes, and I do a live stream almost every Sunday. So and I'm also on Twitter, and I do post my videos on other platforms as well.
Great. Well, I'll put a link to the YouTube channel and the Twitter below. I definitely recommend people check out your channel. It's actually one of the few YouTube channels that I watch regularly. Ton of knowledge there, so people should definitely take a look at that. Thanks once again for joining us today, Mario, and sharing all your knowledge with our audience.
Oh, you're welcome, and thank you for having me.